In this lesson, I want to give you another opportunity to practice the ideas that we introduced in the previous lessons. So in our component, we can have multiple pieces of component state, and we can also have multiple pieces of derived state. In this case, our app component has a state equal to an object with a single property of login mode, and in the render method, our text constant right here is an example of derived state or a derived property. So here's what I'd like for you to do. Currently, our header right here always has the text welcome, and that is because in our H1 right here, we have always hard-coded the text welcome. I want this greeting to be dynamic based on the mode the user is in. So if the user is in login mode, I want this text to read welcome back. And if the user is in sign-up mode or registration mode, I want instead the text to read, we're glad you're here. All right, so a different message to the user, a different heading, depending on what mode they're in. If they're in login mode, the greeting should be welcome back. And if they're in sign-up mode, the greeting should be we're glad you're here. So go ahead and pause the video and figure out the solution, and then I will rejoin you in just a few moments to show you how I tackled this challenge. Okay, so here's how I solved this problem. What we have here is another example of derived state. The greeting that we want to present is based off of or dependent on the login mode state property. And whenever we have dependent state, I do not want to add our new thing, our new state, whatever we want to call it, to the component state, because that only creates more complexity. Imagine if we ignored the advice from the previous lesson and we decided to keep login mode, the button text, and our greeting text in state. That means whenever the user clicks either the login button or the sign up button, right here in lines 11 and 15, we would have to adjust 3 state properties instead of just 1. There's no need to add 3 pieces of state because 2 pieces of state, the button text and the heading or the greeting, are dependent on login mode, and we can simply calculate that dynamic value in our render method. There's no reason to pollute the state with more dependent pieces of data. So keeping that logic, what I decided is what I'm going to do is create another constant in our render method, and I call the greeting. And the value of the greeting constant will once again be calculated depending on the value of my login mode state property. So right here, I once again used a ternary expression. If we are in login mode, I want the greeting constant to be equal to welcome back. The user is logging into our site, so we want to welcome them back. And if they are not in login mode, or the form is not in login mode, I want to instead have the text of, we're glad you're here. So now we have a greeting constant that will be recalculated, recomputed every time the render method runs, but we're not actually using it anywhere. So the final step is down below, right here in our H1. Instead of always hard coding the text welcome, I'm instead going to use curly braces and inject whatever is the value of my greeting constant. And that greeting constant, by the way, that name was entirely up to me. If you chose something different, that's totally fine. As long as you embedded that dynamic value right here, you solved the problem correctly. So now, as always, our form launches in the login mode set to true. So the form is in login mode. So now when the render method runs for the first time, we get welcome back for our header and login into account for our button text. But now when we click the sign up button, we're going to trigger set state to run and set login mode to false. That means the render method will rerun with login mode set to false. And now both the greeting and the text constants are going to be different. So both the header and the button text will be updated momentarily. So when I click sign up, you can see multiple details, multiple facets or elements of our app component immediately dynamically change on screen. And if I go back into login mode, we can see it switches back effortlessly. And we don't have to worry about computing all that derived information because we're simply using regular JavaScript ideas like ternary expressions within our render method to create that kind of dynamism. We're keeping one piece of state, which is login mode, and we're allowing all of the other computed pieces of state to just be handled in the render method like so. And now with just a single component, we're starting to move truly in the direction of having a sign-up form or a login form that can serve either of those two purposes. It can either log in the user or sign up the user, and our UI is changing, right? It's changing in multiple ways now, depending on the state the user's in. And in the next section, it's going to change even more. But the beautiful part is we're able to handle all that dynamism and all that variation within a singular component by utilizing the concept of component state in React. All right, that's all there is to cover in this lesson. So I will see you in the next one.